They are breaking through the barriers and dominating spaces dominated by men. They are changing the narrative. Over the past 30 years, South Africa has seen women trailblazers who, despite the odds, have succeeded in societies that's still patriarchal. Good evening. My name is Oliver Dixon, and welcome to this edition of Democracy 30. As we wrap up our Women's Month focus, we celebrate some of these trailblazers, but also ask, has South Africa offered women enough opportunities to thrive in the past 30 years? Joining me for my conversation this evening is a panel of trailblazers. Dr. Mary Jane Bobape from the South African Environmental Observation Network. She has, amongst others, recently undertook groundbreaking postdoctoral research to improve weather and climate early warning systems within Southern Africa. From Bloemfontein, we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel Zanele Vayeke from the South African Air Force. She's South Africa's first black female helicopter commander who led the helicopter formation during the 2024 presidential inauguration. And from Franschhoek, we have Carla Mitchell from the SAA Africa Foundation of the South African Space Association, as well as Women in Aerospace Africa, among others. But first, let's hear your views on whether women are allowed to have opportunities within which they can thrive.
With this new era that we are in, about feminist and all that, women are given enough opportunities to be equal with men.
They do give them the opportunity to thrive their career.
Gets shown in terms of bursaries that they're given, right? Exclusive ones.
The first female pilot, Mandy Samfega.
The men that I work with undermine me a lot because when it comes to the hardware parts, we need to climb ceilings and all that. And as you know, that women are not meant for hard labor, according to men. So they just think that I'm just made to sit just behind the computer and work with a computer, not do the other things.
They're given an opportunity or a fair share, but it gets still depend under which the category or industry is in this kanjalo.
In South Africa, I do think so. There's many things to take in hand, you know, a lot of opportunities for women. They can thrive now. They have a lot of equality and respect.
They were previously disadvantaged. So I think now, as we can see in many different fields, there's many women.
You've got vice chancellors that are female, that are taking a prominent part, and as well as corporate world, we see the CEOs, female, they are also given a fair chance.
Things that don't come easy for women compared to as men. I don't know if you understand, but things don't come as easy. Like for example, if you go to business, how
it's very difficult.
Very difficult.
And of course, the country is divided on whether or not women have been really given substantively opportunities to be able to thrive to the top. And oftentimes, when they do, it becomes a story of the exception, not a story of the norm. I'm going to start the conversation with you, Dr. Mary Jane Bobape. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. Take us to the mind of 12-year-old you, Mary Jane, you know, just wondering about what sort of dreams were you dreaming at the time? And were you able to actualize them along the path you were dreaming them?
Good evening, Oliver, and good evening to the viewers. I think I'll just start by saying, as a 12-year-old, I can tell you that I was really confused regarding what career path I would follow. And that is because I grew up in a village where we were not really exposed to the available opportunities. What helped me was getting a pamphlet from the South African Weather Service, and that was years later, which was when I was already 16 years old in matric. My mother brought me a pamphlet from the then South African Weather Bureau, which had information regarding how one can become a meteorologist. And for me, that basically gave me a path. Like, I knew with that pamphlet that I had to just go to which university, study meteorology, and that is how I ended up here. And also, when I went to university, I also thought I'm just going to get my first degree and work. However, I got there in my third year. I got a bursary, which then allowed me to also study to do my honors. And then after I finished my honors, I started working, and I found myself working in an environment where my first boss had a PhD. Then that is how the dream of wanting, you know, to study further, to do a master's and then a PhD came along. So it was really not so much that I dreamt about all of these when I was a 12-year-old, because I was not really that exposed at that time. But I just got opportunities as time went on, which allowed me to grow.
These opportunities, did you find that they came to you through sheer luck, or do you find that they came through you because they were made available for women like yourself?
I would say the first one, so in terms of the pamphlet that I mentioned, that one, I think that was just luck, because my mother just happened to attend an event that was organized by somebody. But also I won't exactly say luck, because there is an organization or an individual who organized that particular event where my mother was able to get that pamphlet, which speaks to the importance of science engagement, where, you know, scientific organizations are able to go out there to engage with the school learners so that they become aware of the opportunities that are available. When I started working, the environment that was provided in these scientific organizations is actually that nurturing, that you get in and then you find people, not necessarily females, even males, that are there to support you. I mean, for my honors degree, master's degree, as well as my PhD, I was supervised by males. So it's basically an environment that I found that was nurturing, and there were a lot of opportunities that were made available. There were research projects, and the funders were very specific about wanting to see human capital development. So the principal investigators of these projects needed to work with young people like myself then to supervise us so that we grow scientifically. Yeah.
Carla, I want to bring you into the conversation. You work in the space field. The Square Kilometer Array project in South Africa is globally trailblazing. I remember when I was a little boy, my hero was Mark Shuttleworth. It was easy to look up to Mark Shuttleworth and easy to relate to him. And of course, we all learned the story of Neil Armstrong long before that, right? It's a very male-dominated space. How did you break in?
Well, I think, you know, when I was young, I used to look at the stars and want to work in space. And to be honest, I just believed that it was something for people to go to NASA, for Americans. And I thought there was no place for someone from Africa. That, of course, I learned as I got older, there was opportunity, and we've got now a growing space industry in South Africa. I think the space industry used to be very male-dominated. But they've worked hard to be inclusive. And this industry is about people who share a love of learning and share a passion for being a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And so the industry, I think, has organically grown to be inclusive of everyone who shares that passion.
Yeah. How old were you when you got your first telescope?
Around 10.
And was it at that age where the dream came alive?
Yeah, even earlier. I think I've always just looked up and been fascinated by the stars, the universe and our place in it.
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Zanele Vayeke, I want to bring you into the conversation. We all watched the state of the opening of the 7th administration, which was the inauguration of the president, and we all saw the beautiful, and I want to call it artistic display of pilots and the work that they do. And you're one of those people, a trailblazer in your space as the first female helicopter commander. How significant of a role is that?
Thank you very much for inviting me tonight and evening to the viewers as well. I can say that was a very huge and a big role for one to handle at that time, and I can say it was such an honor and also a privilege, you know, to find my name or myself being mentioned amongst the airmen or a woman who were part of that inauguration.
Yeah, and where did it all begin for you? That you know that this is where you're going to end up one day, or did it the dream find you along the way?
To be honest with you, no, I did not know that this is where I am going to end up today. Like you just said now, the dream did find me along the way. Initially, growing up, I wanted to be a medical doctor. But due to financial constraints and the background that I'm coming from, I could not go to a medical school. So that's when I joined the South African Air Force to try and get away from that kasi location of being at home, because after matric I stayed at home for a year with no plan because I had no financial background. So when I saw an opportunity on the newspaper to join the South African Defence Force, then I went for that opportunity.
Yeah, and the South African Defence Force, the face of it is very masculine, it's very male driven. Is that something you find difficult to navigate around?
Initially, because you are not used to that space and you're not used to that environment, it is a very difficult environment to find yourself in as a woman, because aviation in general, it's a male dominated industry. But as time goes on and growing in ranks and growing in over the years, you get used to being amongst the men. And I must say, it's not a nice thing to say, but you end up sometimes thinking and feeling that you are actually one of the males. But while you must also remember that you are actually a woman, and not just a woman, but also a mother during all of this.
I want to ask you, Mary Jane, when you speak to young girls and you know, when you talk to them about the weather, there's nothing sexy and enticing about the weather, right? In climatology, how do you make the story exciting for young girls without having to sell the dream of chasing storms?
I think first, I mean, we live with weather. For me, I actually find it exciting. Yeah. And I mean, you know, you find a person said, well, it was cold last week or the weather was this way. For me, I find it exciting being able to know why we experience the weather that we experience. So when I speak to the you know, school learners, to the young ones, it is just saying, if you are a meteorologist, you get to understand why we have the weather that we have, because we experience it every day. When we've got flooding, we've got disasters that we see happening. There was the devastating KZN floods. As a meteorologist, you understand what weather systems we experience because of that. And I think the other thing that we also like to clarify with meteorology is that, because the school learners learn about climatology, those that are doing geography are the ones that get to know a little bit about weather and climate from the climatology. However, when you get to university, it's actually physics and mathematics that you need to understand. So there's also that component that we say it's not just the geography, but you also need to understand physical science, you also need to understand mathematics, and those that really love those subjects get excited about meteorology.
I want us to continue this conversation on representation and how much of it matters. I'm going to pick up from you, Carla, on the other side of the break. And I think the important story to ask is was there a differential in how young girls are being taught and treated and nurtured and guided into certain career paths versus young boys of the same age? And does that play a role in the eventual outcomes of it? We're going to continue that conversation on the other side of the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to Democracy 30. Tonight we ask the question, has South Africa provided enough substantive opportunities for women to thrive over the last 30 years of our democracy? I'm in conversation with Dr. Mary Jane Bobape, as well as Lieutenant Colonel Zanele Vayeke, as well as Carla Mitchell. Carla, I want to pick up the conversation with you at this point. When you reflect on where it all started for you, and you think about your experiences, not just in university, but in high school, in primary school, being taught, was there a differential treatment in how you were being taught versus how boy children were being taught in the same grade, in the same age, around the same time? And have you seen improvement in that? And effectively what I'm asking here, were you given the license to dream as a young girl?
Yeah, so I think I'd like to answer that in two parts. Firstly, I think when I was young, I didn't really see so much a difference in the teaching or treatment of girls and boys in my personal experience. But I think a lot of that came from what girls felt they could do, either within their communities, within their own homes. I think a lot of girls like myself didn't realize that certain opportunities were in fact opportunities that they could pursue. And I think that that has been addressed very well within the country in that many more opportunities are available, but young women are aware that these are available to them. I think there are a lot of factors that affect what young women believe they can do and what is a possibility for them. And the second part to that is my personal passion project. We are developing the first radio astronomy telescope array that's going to be put on the lunar surface. We should have a launch confirmed. And if that happens, we'll be delivering this telescope to the moon in 2028. This is built and designed by Africans, and it will be a world first by Africans. And the real driver behind this is that we want this to become a part of the knowledge base of every youth in Africa, that young people can know that they can dream of the moon and get there, boys and girls alike. And I think young people really need to understand that these opportunities are available to them. You can become an astronomer, you can become an astronaut. And I think many young women across Africa don't even realize that these things may even be a possibility for them.
Yeah. Lieutenant General, I want to, Lieutenant Colonel, ask you perhaps the same question. When you think back to where your journey started in the Air Force and choosing the path you're now on, did you find it was easier or more difficult for you on the basis that you're a woman?
Thank you for that question, because I just want to echo on your previous speaker. What I can say is that it's not difficult because you're a woman, or it's not easy because you are a male. We go through the same training, whether you're a female or you're a male, because remember, at the end of the day, that aircraft must be flown, and when you look at the aircraft, you don't look at the gender behind the person flying the aircraft. You're looking at the personality. So they need to build a certain persona or personality out of someone to be able to fly the aircraft. So for me, when I joined the Air Force, there was no males, there was no females. But what I can say from where I'm coming from, initially it would feel like, as a female, I did not expect that much hard work or the intensity or the hard work that was expected at that time. So maybe that's why initially you would think that it's easier for males and it's difficult for females. But looking at everything in my current position now, I can just say that the training is for both males and females.
Mary Jane, do you find that your research is doubted when people realize, oh, it's a woman that's doing the research? Do you have to fight for its credibility on the basis of that? Or do you find that the scientific community is more enlightened than everyone else and they accept it for what it is on its own merits?
I would say that within my area, people do not doubt the work that has come out because, it's being published by a woman. I mean, there's a whole scientific process in the way that we do our work. You conduct your studies, you will collect data, you will analyze the data. And when you publish, you can go and present at a conference, and then the way that questions are being asked will really be similar. It's not that as a female I would get more difficult question, or there will be a feeling that what I'm saying, I'm less confident in what I'm saying. There is none of that. And then there are also, with the scientific processes, we publish papers. So these papers are peer reviewed. And again, I've not really experienced that I will get a rejection because I'm a female. So the rejections will come in and talk into the merit of the science that we are dealing with. So I think, speaking to also how I felt as I was growing up, I've really not felt like I'm treated differently compared to the boy children that I was growing up with. Even when I was studying throughout the years, even where I have worked, I've not experienced that I was treated differently. I was approached just based on the output that I was producing. Perhaps opportunities would come based on the areas that I've chosen to specialize in.
Yeah, you're doing postdoctoral studies right now in early climate warning systems. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that is actually a project. Currently, I am the managing director of the South African Environmental Observation Network, which is within the National Research Foundation. So the project on the early warning systems was a project to implement what we call the SADC cyber infrastructure framework. So cyber infrastructure refers to high performance computing. So these are really big computers that would occupy a full room. They talk to high speed connectivity as well as big data. So there were these computers that were put up by the cyber infrastructure experts that needed to be used for something. So I came as an atmospheric modeling specialist, and we worked with 5 different countries within SADC to assist with the implementation of this framework. So we implemented a weather forecasting model and worked with scientists that had never published before, that had never run models before.
Oh, wow.
We showed them how to implement this model so that these models can work on their high performance computers. We showed them how to analyze the data, and we actually ended up with people that never published papers leading on these papers or co-authoring some of the papers that we ended up writing. We found there were challenges just in the way that the models simulate our high impact weather, which is why we are continuing with research so that we can develop our own models. So this work was made possible by the work that was led through the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation on this SADC cyber infrastructure. So they've contributed to the development of this framework, working together with the National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure Systems. So the idea was just to implement this particular work. In my current work now at the NRF, we are putting up observations because those are also critical for the development of early warning systems. So you need an observation network. So we are going out there, up on the mountains, on the Drakensberg, in the oceans. We're putting up observations so that we can have initial conditions as well as data to verify these models, because models have a number of assumptions. They are limited in what they can do. So through that research, we're able to identify some of the shortcomings. So at the moment,
It's absolutely fascinating. Carla, you want to put a telescope on the moon by 2028. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a project born out of collaboration and volunteers, and we've designed this telescope and we've applied to a launch partner, which we'll hear about at the end of September. And if we're approved, they will deliver us to the moon. Or
is it SpaceX?
No. Our telescope will be delivered to the moon in 2028, and it will be the first operating radio telescope array on the moon, and it is fully designed and built by Africa. So it would make us very proud and hopefully, like I said, inspire young people. It'll do first-time science that nobody's done before. And there's a big link between space and our other guests working in the environment and weather. Space weather has a big impact on climate, and so these science areas are overlapping, and we hope that observations from the moon. I
was actually going to ask you, what sort of information do you hope that the telescope would be able to gather for you?
Well, this first part will just be a technology demonstrator, so our science case will be fairly limited, but we would like to look at the Earth's auroral emissions as well as solar bursts and contribute more information to the impact between solar weather and the magnetosphere, and that should help contribute more to climate models on Earth.
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel, perhaps I want to end of the conversation with you here by asking this question. And I think this is the crux of what we're trying to, the conversations we want to have here on Democracy 30. When you reflect over the last 30 years of South Africa's democracy, do you think women are better off today, by and large, that more opportunities have been given to women today than if you compare that to 30 years ago, 20 years ago even?
I must say, firstly, we are in a much better position currently, but I do still and feel like more can still be done to have more women in all departments. I'm not just talking about aviation or the defense force, but I'm talking about all spaces, government and private sector as well. Yes, the government is trying their best to have females in all these leadership positions, but I still think that more can still be done to make sure that females are taking up the space.
Yeah. Ladies, that's where we're going to have to leave it for tonight. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for your work and well done. And so many young girls are looking up to you. Same with you, Carla. It is incredible the work you guys do at the SKA. In fact, I was telling Mary Jane earlier that I almost ended up working there myself. And so I have this conversation with you in great envy this evening. And you're a lighthouse to many young women. Same with you, Mary Jane. And hopefully we'll have more young girls chasing storms and doing the sort of research and impact work that you're doing. We really do appreciate it, and all the best to you all. That's where we leave it for tonight's episode of Democracy 30. Thank you so much for being with us. Look, this may be the end of Women's Month, but this doesn't end the conversation on the advancement of women. It's hard work that we need to continue collectively as South Africans for the advancement and the protection of women. And so as we close off the August month here on Democracy 30, we ask you to not end the conversation here, but to continue it wherever you may find yourself. My name is Oliver Dixon. For myself and the team, it's good night for now. Cheers.